Boxing Truth here. I'm still reeling from the devastating defeat of the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Golden State Warriors in a hell of a series. Really thought it was going to be the Thunder's year this year, especially being up 3-1, but it wasn't meant to be. It is what it is. Enough basketball talk. It's time for some boxing talk, as I'm still a little upset with the Thunder's defeat. So I felt like taking it out on Haymon and his fighters, as the majority of them are pretenders and protected champs. Protected chumps, I mean. Just wanted to do a video about Al Haymon and some of his majority of his clients, as I've been getting attacked by some Al Haymon fanboys, Al Haymon defenders, PBC defenders, saying shit that I only trash black fighters, that I'm racist. But I just want to break it down to y'all. This ain't about racism. This is not about black or white. This is not about only trashing black fighters or talking shit about Al Haymon fighters. I just don't understand how y'all don't see it. It's Al Haymon. Like, it's right in front of y'all faces. All you have to do is look at what Haymon's doing with the majority of his fighters, how he's managing them, how he promotes them, and you can see the result. It's not very impressive. Yes, in the YTBC, a majority of the same fighters get trashed. They get criticized and just totally dismissed by a lot of boxing fans, especially on the YTBC. But it's because of Al Haymon and how he makes his majority of his fighters look like bitches and protected chumps. It's not these fighters' fault. It's Al Haymon and how he manages them, controls them, how he constantly creates easy paydays, or fighting obscure opposition, or not taking big fights, or constantly putting them in in-house showcase bouts. This is what it's about. It's Al Haymon. He's the problem, and he's making his fighters look like protected bitches and pretenders. I mean, right now I got the list. I'm looking at the list of Al Haymon's fighters, and I'm constantly getting comments that Al Haymon's got a bunch of fighters. He's got all the fighters. He's got a lot of fighters, yes, that's true, but he doesn't have the best fighters in the world, and that is a fact. How the hell are you going to create a premier boxing champions series, Al Haymon is, if you don't have the premier fighters of the world, if you don't have the premier fighters of the sport? Just look at the pound-for-pound list. Look at whatever pound-for-pound list, the Ring Magazine, the Box Recs, other media's outlets, and you'll see a familiar trend. None of Al Haymon fighters are on those lists. And people are going to say, oh, it's racism. Nah, man. It's because they don't fight nobody. They don't dare to be great. They're content taking easy paydays, fighting faded guys coming up in weight to be cannon fodder, cherry picking guys in the top 15 of sanctioning bodies rankings, which are a joke. When I hear some people on the YTBC take those ratings like they're gospel, bro, you still have a lot to learn about boxing if you do that. I mean, you cannot take sanctioning body rankings all that seriously, because they have, promoters and managers have their influence. Also, the organizations have their own influence of who they want to rate. You really have to go by the people's ratings, who they rate as the best fighters in the world. You have to use other sources. You can't go by sanctioning body rankings, because they're one of the worst. That's one of the worst ratings to go by. They're manipulated. They're subjective, and they're also easily bought by guys with influence in boxing. Now, I'm looking at the majorities. I'm looking at the list of Haymon fighters, and he has a lot of fighters. It's true, but who would you say that's even like that's doing it right now? That's getting recognition from the boxing world. That's not many. I mean, there's really none. None of the guys on the pound list. They're not getting the recognition compared to other fighters from across the street or promoted by others. It's because Heyman's not really doing a good job with these guys. He doesn't promote them well. He doesn't give them a lot of exposure in terms of promotion. Yes, he's got them on free network TV, but a lot of his guys are on the shelf. They're inactive. They're not fighting. They don't fight anybody. They only fight tomato cans when they do. I'll just give a few examples. All right. Andre Berto, hype job, was stuffed down the boxing fans' throats, took on a bunch of obscure opposition, was gifted a belt, and then finally stepped up, and you saw how really good he really was. And he wasn't all that good. Peter Quillen, another hype job, overrated, was protected and put in there with carefully selected opposition. You saw his limitations as a fighter, especially against when he stepped up his level of opposition. Even against Fernando Guerrero, he was getting outboxed. He was getting outboxed by Hassan Nandam. Take away the 6 knockdowns, he loses that fight. Adrian Broner, another hype job. Just a guy just got some talent, but he's not a great fighter. Who's the best opponent he beat? Antonio DeMarco. That's his best win to this day, and it's still his best performance to this day. Gary Russell Jr., another protected chump, who continues to fight cannon fodder opposition as a world champion. He's just a paper champion who's fought nobody. His first real step up, he gets his ass whooped. He's been one of the most protected fighters in the Al Haymon stable ever. I mean, I have little... I'm almost done with Gary Russell. I mean, he's a joke to me. The guy fights nothing but TBAs 2 weeks out of a fight. I mean, his opponents don't get selected most of the time about a week or two away from the fight, which means he ain't going to get any world beaters or any significant competition in the ring. And I'm not trashing all black Al Haymon fighters. I mean, I like Keith Thurman. I like Jared Hurd. I think that dude's got a lot of potential. I mean, he just trashed Frank Galarza, who had a lot of momentum going into that fight. Was knocking guys out, was steamrolling guys. And then Jared Hurd just put on a beautiful boxing display of counterpunching. I was very impressed by Jared Hurd. I mean, I was wowed. It's been a while since I've been wowed by a prospect, especially one that signed with Al Haymon. He absolutely had a tremendous performance, and he gets put on the shelf for almost 8 months, and he's finally going to return in June. Just that Al Haymon just doesn't do his job, man. He puts these guys on the shelf after big wins, don't keep the momentum going. The same shit's happening with Daniel Jacobs, and now he has to take steps back in his career by perhaps fighting a rematch against Sergio Mora. Omar Figueroa's career has been in the oblivion. He's done jack shit for a while, ever since he wasn't getting managed by Golden Boy, or his career wasn't directed or had a little influence from Golden Boy. Now he's fully strictly with Haymon. He's done nothing. Had a terrible performance against a 149-pound Antonio DeMarco, who was fighting way above his best weight, and he hasn't fought since. When's he fighting again? So Gerald Washington's probably going to be another Seth Mitchell, who was a hype job on HBO, and he ended up getting chinned and flattened. Evan Rodriguez is a pretender. Robert Easter Jr., I want to see more of him. He just knocked out Algenis Mendez, a former 130-pound champion. He had a good performance. I was impressed. He knocked him out. I also like Errol Spence. I like Errol Spence because he comes to fight. He puts on a show. He makes for entertaining bouts. He doesn't fight like a bitch. He doesn't play tag with his opponents as some fighters do that look up to Floyd Mayweather. I mean, I like Errol Spence's style. I like what he brings to the table. Hopefully, Haymon can deliver with Spence. Keep him, get him developed, get him ready, and then pull the trigger on the Cal Brook fight. Well, it remains to be seen. I'll believe it when I see it. Who else is on the list? Amir Khan's signing with Al Haymon has been terrible for him. He's made money, but he ended up getting chinned and flattened. And I'm pretty sure people have seen the light with Amir Khan. They finally realized he was a hype job all along. Who else he has? Durrell brothers. Andre Durrell has been a major disappointment. Has done nothing in his career ever since the Super 6, where he had some moments. Ended up getting knocked out in the disqualification win against Offer Abraham. He hasn't been the same ever since. Tony Harrison, another hype job. He'll get chinned by the next solid fighter he fights. Erickson Lubin's a prospect coming up, but we don't know how real or good he is. He's very young. He still has a lot of time to develop. So yeah, he has a bunch of fighters, but guys that are not very promising, like a Dominic Brazil, or opponents like Eddie Chambers. He has guys that are opponents, guys that he can sacrifice. He protects guys that are his most viable pieces. For some strange reason, some of his fighters, he punishes them when they get big wins. Like in the case of Danny Jacobs. Or in the case of Lamont Peterson. What the hell is Haymon doing with Lamont Peterson? The guy's been very inactive. So I don't know what's the deal with him. Danny Garcia is one of his prized pieces in his stable. However, he gets hated on, shitted on, because he's fought very weak opposition in some of his fights. He gets destroyed because of the Rod Salka fight. However, he's on this list. He's the one fighter that has the best resume, has actually been in tough fights, and I believe deserves some consideration to be on the pound-for-pound list. I mean, he's a gringo, a Puerto Rican, but born in Philly. Not really good in speaking Spanish. He's not a black fighter. He still gets hated on and shitted on, mostly because of some close decisions and also fighting Rod Salka, but doesn't get the credit I believe he deserves in getting upset wins and also delivering on his biggest fights. So I just wanted to point this out to people that are leaving comments on my page saying that I'm a racist, that I only trash black fighters. No, that's not true. It's just I mostly only trash Al Haymon fighters, and it's not always consistent. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Terence Crawford. I mean, imagine if Terence Crawford was an Al Haymon fighter. He wouldn't get any recognition. Because I don't believe he does. I mean, I don't believe he's pound for pound. No, not based on that resume. He's won 2 titles, but he didn't beat any lineal champ. He didn't beat the best guy in the division. He hasn't unified it as well yet. But now he's gonna be in a fight with Victor Poso in a significant fight. See, he's making moves. He's doing something. He's about to unify, and he's also getting a big promotional push from Top Rank. I mean, those guys at Top Rank just promote their fighters better compared to Al Haymon. I mean, Al Haymon wants to be behind the scenes. He doesn't want to be seen, doesn't want to take interviews, doesn't want to promote his guys. So he allows sham promoters to try to promote his guys, but there's no passion because those guys, they're not committed to these guys. Sham promoters like DeBella and TGB, they're not going to be as passionate about these guys because these guys are not signed to them. They're just taking a cut. They're getting paid to do a job. But these fighters are not bound to any of the sham promoters that Haymon hires. So it is what it is. I mean, Al Haymon has to Stop making a lot of his fighters look like bitches. Stop protecting so many of them. And I mean, I hear some of these guys want to be protected. They want to continue to get good, solid, decent paydays for easy work. But there's other fighters that want to be challenged, that do want the big fights. I believe Keith Thurman wants those fights. He's one of the most vocal Al Haymon fighters about getting the big fights. He's always talking about big fights. Unfortunately for him, Al Haymon hasn't delivered for him. 26 fights. Look at that resume. Faded lightweights. Cannon fodder. Former faded world champions that he ended up getting rocked by, almost getting stopped against Collazo. I would have to say Keith Thurman out of his whole list is my favorite Al Haymon fighter. I also like Danny Garcia because I think he's a pretty damn good fighter. I think he's a real fighter. I think he could compete against anybody. I'm not saying he'll beat anybody. He could beat everybody, but he'll give it a go. I mean, he'll give it his best shot. Errol Spence, I like what I see. I need to see more though, but I like what I see. Deontay Wilder, he's a lab project, man. I hate to say it. I mean, he's been a project ever since Golden Boy brought him along. They developed him pretty much under the guidance of Haymon as well. Over 30-something fights, still hasn't fought a legitimate contender for as a world champion. I mean, it's just, that's why he's not on the pound list. Because too much cherry picking, man. Over 30-something fights, a bunch of voluntary defenses, giving impression of trying to avoid Povetkin. I mean, whatever. I said enough about Deontay Wilder. Looking at a few more fighters here. The Charlo brothers. I think Jermel's needs a lot more work. I think Jermall has something. I think he can make for entertaining, good fights. I think he's a legitimate world champion for the IBF. He's had a step-up fight. He delivered. He was able to overcome it. The Peterson brothers. Anthony Peterson's been has had a waste of a career. So I don't know what I mean. If I'm another promoter or a rival manager or whatever, and I'm trying to steal any Al Haymon fighters, or if I was attempting or trying to, there's really not many fighters I'd be willing to try to steal from him, because I don't see much value here or upside in the majority of his clients. He doesn't have the premier fighters of the world. He doesn't have the best fighters in the sport. That's on the other side of the street. Or just look at the current pound-for-pound lists, and you'll see there's a lot more upside in those names. But if I was a rival promoter, or just to see what I could do with some of these guys, I would still want Keith Thurman. I would still want Deontay Wilder, but I have to match him correctly, carefully. I want Errol Spence. I want Danny Garcia. I want Jarrett Hurd. And I want Javier Fortuna. Still looking at the list. He's got Sergey Devejidenko. I could take him. And that's pretty much it. I mean, look what Haymon did to Chavez's career. Oh, I also want Offer Beterbiev as well. Could use him. Definitely some upside there. I mean, look what Haymon did to Chavez Jr. career. Chavez Jr. was brought up by top rank. was actually a real fighter at times, improved, won a world title, was on a pay-per-view platform, did good numbers even, had a solid fan base, and Al Haymon ruined it in one night in a bout against Fonfara at a catchweight, where Chavez, for the first time in his career, fought someone who was actually bigger than he was, and you saw the result. But just wanted to talk a little bit about the situation. It's not racism. It's Al Haymon and how he makes his fighter look like, a majority of his fighters look like bitches and protected chumps. This is Boxing Truth. I'm out.